Good afternoon, students. This is Mr. V. Today we're going to go over repeating forms in perspective. Now what that means is it's going to show you an actual tool, a scaffolding pre-drawing technique that's going to show you guys how to make forms that repeat, like fence posts, sidewalk tiles, lamp posts, building windows, and so on. And what it is, it's a tool to help you place it accurately. So let's take a look. So if we look right here in the middle, it's a drawing of several trees planted evenly apart. And as you can see, there's this weird looking scaffolding graft thing underneath of it. With these trees, they're the same height, they're the same distance apart, and they're all receding off in the distance. And this tool is a way to help you figure out how to accurately draw it as such. So let's look at some facts and characteristics. Once again, repeating forms aren't made by simply eyeballing where they go. A scaffold is required for accuracy. The cool thing about the scaffold is it works in perspective or out of perspective, meaning if you're going to make, like, let's say you're going to draw a high-rise building, and that building, let's say it's one of the planes that's not in perspective, it's like facing you directly. Well, in order to draw all those windows correctly so they line up right, you would actually use this repeater without using any vanishing points. It may seem as if this is an advanced skill. It's really not. It's actually one of the first things you're taught in perspective for architecture, drafting, design, lettering, and fine art. It's one of these things that's just a basic skill, a basic technique, and so if you're mindful of it, it's another tool to go in your tool shed to help your work. One thing to remember with this tool, it's a pre-drawing tool, meaning you're not pushing down hard on your pencil while you're drawing with this. You're just very lightly drawing. Now, that's going to take some practice for you guys who are still learning how to control your arm, control your pencil and such, but it's very critical that you draw very lightly because this is supposed to be erased or shaded out completely from your finished piece. It would look pretty weird to have this really awesome drawing of like an apple tree orchard, and then in the midst of all this nature scene you've got this crazy like mechanical looking scaffolding underneath every single form. You want to erase that when you're done. So let's look at some examples. Right down here is a step-by-step on how to create the actual scaffold. And basically, this would be what you would do if you were drawing buildings that were looking right at you, windows that were not in perspective. The process is exactly the same. The only difference is that you're lining your lines up to a vanishing point instead of just drawing them straight up and down and straight left and right. So the way it works is you first start with a square. Now you need to find the middle of that square, and you do that by connecting both sets of corners to create an X in the middle. Once you find that X, then you've found your center point of your square. Draw a horizontal line right in the middle to show where the middle is. This would be a line that would be connected to your vanishing point if it were in perspective. And finally, you draw a vertical line up and down. So you have this kind of a bike spoke radial pattern. Now you've already seen this in how to draw rounded forms. It's the same exact principle. The next step is you need to know two specific points on this weird looking thing, and those points are located at intersections at 6 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And what you do is once you get those points, you then draw a line connecting between those 2 points, and you terminate the line. You stop drawing the line once it hits the very top of your scaffold. From there, you draw another vertical line down, and you just can repeat the process from steps 2 on down. You don't need to draw the whole X and all that again. You just need to go vertical line, find those 2 points, slash. Vertical line, find those 2 points, slash. And you get into a rhythm with it, and it starts to really flow really quick. So use this as a step-by-step. Use this as an example that you might have out on your desk while you're doing this. And in the demonstration, you'll see how it's done in perspective. Now let's look at some non-examples. These are common non-examples I see with beginning students who choose not to use the technique. So what we've got on the very top and the bottom are two separate mistakes I want you guys to be mindful of. The very top is like a giant trailer-shaped rectangle going off in the distance, and we've got the first line, it's looking good, the second line or segment looking good, the third line looking good, and then all of a sudden it just kind of turns into random haphazard slop. And what this is a student who kind of gave up on it and wanted to just rush through it. So if you don't use this, your lines are going to look very, very sloppy. On the bottom is a second example. This is something that's commonly seen. Once the lines start being laid down, the vertical lines start to slant. The segments start to slant. And what that is that's the student not being aware of what angle their ruler is at while they're drawing those segments. One thing that you could do is to use what's called a T-square. That's one of those tools that you see in the back of my room. It looks like an ice pick with a ruler attached to it. The blade portion, the ice pick piece, is designed to line up right on your table. And if you tape your paper down, that stabilizes the paper, and then you just slide that ruler up and down or on the bottom of your table, left and right, in order to get those lines accurate. It's a way for you to have straight lines in your piece. It sure beats using a protractor where you have to measure all the degrees. So let's look at some practical applications. Let's assume that this high-rise building with all of its repeating windows and different stories was something that you wanted to do in your drawing. Well, this would be perfectly possible. You could do this, but it would be very complicated. Architects who create buildings like this typically use computer software to do it, but all that software originated from this exact same technique. So, as you can see, this scaffolding technique gives an example on how it lines up with all these windows. The same principle applies if I were to do a larger surface of windows. If I were to, say, focus on a tall rectangular portion of all these windows, you could do the exact same thing. That's how this technique applies. If you were not to use this, if you were to do this by hand or eyeball it, it would be a very strange, odd-looking structure. Automotive design usually requires this to get accurate placement of not only where the wheels are at, but just other parts of the form. Computers are typically used to do this, but they always require artists, designers to create kind of a thumbnail sketch to rough things out. And these are the principles based on where the wheels are located. And if you look at the wheel, it's treated as if it were a large square, and the repeater principle still carries on. As you can see, the top and the bottom line up to the vanishing points, and the intersections take place at the same area. This artist just chose to use slants going up to the left instead of up to the right, like we did before. But the principle is exactly the same. This is an example of the technique applied as it was back in the day when people were just starting to crack perspective. This is an art student of present day studying the old master's 16th century techniques, and it's exactly the same as what you're learning now, except, notice, all the tiles are all of their own individual strips. You don't necessarily have to do one strip, and this is just super advanced, so it gives an example of how complex the process can be once you get up there if you're going to do things by hand. But art can be described as a science. That's the whole purpose why I'm showing this to you. So that's just one of the things that makes art interesting. So I hope you found this helpful. I look forward to seeing you in class, and if there's anything that you didn't get, feel free, rewind it and double check how that repeater works. You'll have the Frayer handout at your disposal as you work on your projects, and if you have any questions, let me know. I'll point you to the answer. And I look forward to seeing you in class. Bye.